We just had a really entertaining conversation, and I think you'll really enjoy this one. You think so, Allison?
Yes, I've loved every one of our podcast episodes so far, but I've never laughed harder than I have than talking to Joe and Carl. And I also learned a lot, so win-win.
So today we had a really fun conversation with Joe Daccache and Carl Schoellhammer. And Joe is a project leader at DeciBio, which is a boutique precision medicine strategy consulting firm. He has a PhD in immunology from Harvard, and he has been instrumental in offering insights that fuel the precision medicine revolution. And Carl has been recognized as one of the Business Insider's 30 business leaders under 40, and he's also a principal at DeciBio. And he also is the founder of Suono Bio, which is a biotech transforming therapeutic delivery. These two have a lot of knowledge about what it takes to go into the strategy side of biotech, and they were just a blast to talk to.
They are so fun, so nice, and also really have a lot of good insight into what you don't learn in your PhD and how that can impact early founders and, just as you build your career, things to be on the lookout for that you may not have ever thought about needing to know in your prior PhD life. So, hope you enjoy the episode.
All right. Thank you, Joe and Carl, for being here. Let's dive in with we like to ask all of our guests what their career paths looked like. So, if you don't mind, both of you telling us what you wanted to be when you were 7, what you are now, and how did you get there?
I wanted to be something completely different. I was going to, the first career that I ever thought about was being a pilot. The reason why I wanted to be a pilot was because I had a fascination of exploring places and things like I've never thought of or have never been. And the other reason is to just take people where they want to be and be happy to their family and make connections. That did not come to fruition, and I'm in a completely different field now. I'm still exploring and doing some exploring, but completely different. That was the first career that I ever wanted.
Did you like go someplace with your family and think that's what I want to do, is be a pilot?
No, I actually never was on a plane until I was 19. So yeah, I was just pure fascination with technology and how planes even function and the idea of the wind kind of carrying and helping a plane versus not, and how people just were very happy. And when I grew up, not a lot of people were, and I grew up in Lebanon, not a lot of people had money to even travel. So it was like kind of more of a luxury considered back then. And it was just like a culmination of really want to travel because not a lot of people are able to, and also want to make people happy, and I want to explore the world. And I also had the fascination of just going to space. That's a different kind of pilot, but I still wanted to go to space, and that was all. If you want to go anywhere, you have to learn how to fly.
Yeah. Allison shared that dream.
Nice.
Well, I really wanted to be an astronaut. That was my big thing. I
Ooh,
very much did not become an astronaut, so
me too. And I was like, that's a far-fetched dream. Let's just stay with a pilot on Earth.
yeah, that dream totally died for me. So I didn't even become anything close to a pilot, astronaut, anything like that. But okay. Now I just follow the NASA Instagram account and I live very vicariously through those people.
Preaching to the choir.
Carl, what about you? What did you want to be when you were 7?
I was thinking about it and like, I don't know. I wasn't one of those kids who was like, oh, I want to be, blah. I don't think I even thought about it, to be blunt, which I feel like everyone has the end. They're like, oh yeah, I want to be like this thing or that thing. I'm like, I was like
I mean,
building
Karina wanted to be a
blocks.
horse.
Okay, I like that. I like that. Yeah, I don't have a
Still
good answer.
striving.
I didn't really want to be anything. I kind of like, honestly, I feel like if anything, I meandered in life, but it all worked out really well. So I feel very fortunate. But yeah, it was a meander.
And you meandered your way into founding a biotech and becoming a biotech strategist. How did that happen?
Yeah, so it was just part of kind of college. I had an internship in Merck and Company, the drug company, and that sort of cemented my interest in life sciences, medicines, that sort of thing. And so I went to grad school, and not even because I wanted to go to grad school, but just my family. That's what you do. You go to grad school. So I went to grad school, and I happened to work on very translational products or projects in my PhD. So specifically drug delivery, because again, I'm not like hardcore molecular biologist. I like to say I'm biology adjacent. So delivering a drug I can get my mind around. And, the science just worked. We were trying to do effectively oral delivery of gene therapies, RNA-based medicines, proteins, in a formulation agnostic manner. And it just worked. And that's not the way science works, right? When you try science or try an experiment, like, it doesn't work. And that's why a PhD takes 5 years, because you're just figuring out the conditions to do the one experiment to publish on, and that's your PhD. But for me, like, it just worked. And it wasn't because I'm some amazing scientist, like, it just, so that's really what pointed, me and, folks I was working with. I was like, okay, there's something here. Like, this is just really weird. We could deliver RNA, we could deliver DNA, we could deliver biology, we could deliver anything we tried. And so that's what set us down the course then of starting a company. So I kind of, put my head down, all right, what do we do here? And raise money and everything else.
And Joe, how did you get to be where you are?
Switching from being an astronaut and a pilot to the biotech, I went through many phases of what I wanted to do, but really the switch was, so I was before even, I was still in high school, even earlier. My grandpa had tongue cancer. So, and it was like an overnight thing. He had no symptoms, and then suddenly, they discovered that he had tongue cancer. And it was extremely fast. Within 6 months, it was like completely metastasized everywhere. And when I was trying to like engage with, I was young and I was trying to ask all those questions about, how can your own body just turn against you, basically? And why don't we have solutions where, cancer is not like a new thing. It's been around for probably the beginning of time. Why don't we have those, advances? And that's actually what drew me into science in the first place. So I really, started on the biochem journey and then ended up doing a PhD in immunology. And I'm just like super excited about the immunology space specifically. If one thing could save us is, I think, really strongly believe that it's going to be the immune system in any disease, generally speaking. And that's one of the first probably breaks that are going to just malfunction in your body for any disease. So that's what drew me into biotech in the first, or actually science in the first place, and then getting into the more immunology side. And then why I got into consulting in the biotech specifically was, as Carl probably kind of alluded to, is things don't work and you're trying to find those shortcuts to make it happen in a specific condition. But most of the time, it doesn't work and it's kind of an artificial environment, versus in a biotech and more pharma, you actually have a little more consistent process. It's like repetitive. So I want to kind of help that process and not really do the science. I wanted to do more of the thinking and behind, a lot of times you have something that is worthy to be on the market and just doesn't make it to the market because the money is not there, or there's no business, or there's no market for it. But in my opinion, there's always a market, right? You just have to go at the right time, the right place, with the right conditions, and there's always a market. So I wanted to help the biotech industry in that way.
Now, Carl and Joe, you guys work together in sort of a multitude of different ways, and you both have your hands in a lot of pots. I guess the main one we should start off with is DeciBio. Could you tell us a little bit about sort of the mission behind it, a little bit of what DeciBio is all about, and how you both work within their framework?
DeciBio is a strategy consulting firm focused in the life sciences. So we've always focused in kind of tools, diagnostics, specific to life science research. The firm started out over a decade ago, kind of as a reports company. One of the founders was waiting for a job offer from Illumina. I think they closed the division then and were like, sorry, no job. So it didn't materialize. And he was loving writing these reports. So he started, doing that more and more. And this has really grown into, full-fledged strategy. Joe and I help lead the kind of the advanced therapy practice. So things that cover cell therapy, gene therapies, oligos, mRNA, all that stuff. And still we cover the therapeutics directly, but also have a lens towards, the tools aspect of that. How do you actually manufacture these therapeutics? What tools do you need? The bioprocessing, these sorts of aspects, which is really coming into focus, today.
Excellent. And so can you tell us how your academic background influences what you do at DeciBio? Do you specialize within those strategy arms? Have you sort of specialized internally, I guess?
So Carl did point to, I think part of the excitement for him and I specifically is really kind of the therapeutics, like those next generation therapeutics, right? So this is all coming from our knowledge as well, and PhDs, or even before that, right? Like working on those advanced therapeutics, because the tools without the therapeutics is nothing, and then therapeutics without the tools is nothing, right? And even in the diagnostics, when you add the diagnostic side to it, that's even, a little more complex. So my personal interest, for example, is, heavily antibody drug conjugates, which those are antibodies that are conjugated to drugs and cell therapies. I mean, cell therapies are mostly, if not all, or nearly all, because you have mesenchymal, but a lot of those types of cell therapies that are on the market or coming up now are immune cells, right? So this is like most of the excitement that, at least for me, and then you can't manufacture something without the tools, and that's something that we focus on. So that's how our background helped us in kind of more of an interest, but there are a lot of skills that you learn in your PhD that will ultimately help you, right? So even if you're not using your knowledge, 100% of your knowledge throughout your academic career, it still helps you, right? You're running all those things at the same time, you're running all the work streams, you have to think about a team, there are a lot of skills that you learn, especially in a PhD, that are honestly like just recipe for success in any career moving forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Carl, sort of the same question, but from your perspective, you also founded Suono. When you think about, what your PhD didn't teach you, what are the things that you've had to learn on the job that are in addition to that academic background?
I think the academic background teaches you how to think. There's kind of the specific science you do. I'm not sure that's too helpful to, say, consulting or these sorts of things, but it's how you think about a problem. How do you tackle a problem? What did the PhD not teach me? A lot. Starting a company, right? The majority of that is kind of the business aspect of things. How do you communicate to people what you're doing? How do you communicate why it matters? How do you communicate why they should write you like a 7-figure check to do that thing? And especially as in the PhD, I think most talks you give are like pretty long, pretty technical, and like really go off on the deep end. And I think you have to do the exact opposite, in kind of the business strategy world. And so I'd say it's along those lines of thinking about the real translational aspects, the real marketability aspects. A lot of folks in academia, there's what I like to call kind of theoretical world problems. One of which can be like adherence to medication. If you look in theory, adherence to medication is like $100 billion problem or some like crazy number. And so academics say, oh, adherence, that's a market. Like we can create a solution here. It's a $100 billion market. And you're like, well, there's kind of these downstream effects of non-adherence that lead to this massive $100 billion number. But who pays that $100 billion? And they kind of look at you blankly and they say, well, it's a $100 billion problem. And you're like, okay, but who feels the $100 billion? And if you go down the rabbit hole, the answer is no one. The answer is insurance providers maybe feel like a small fraction of that. So the market, actual market, when you step out of the lab and want to start a company, maybe $1 billion or less, maybe hundreds of millions. It's small. And so it's thinking through the real aspects of, when you step out of the lab, you're thinking about payers and policy, all these things you never thought about. You saw in the journal that, non-treatment, cost the health system, blah, 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 blah. No one, those dollars aren't actually changing hands. And so now you need to think about actually like what actually changes hands. Who is seeing that? Who's your customer, especially in healthcare? Like the end user is generally not your customer. And that's, a different mind shift.
Yeah, 100%. This is one of the biggest shocks maybe that after my career, like after the PhD, where when I started in like, looking at the business aspect of like different career paths, besides science, the only thing you can think about in the PhD, and this is like at least for me, and that's why I'm kind of bringing it up, is the patient, right? We have something that's going to work and the patient will get it. It's 99.9% of the time the patient will not get it, at least not in the timeline that you're thinking about, because there are all those complex systems and complex reasons why someone wouldn't do it. An example is something that's like always on the news, right? They should cut the drug prices. I was like, well, theoretically, I would love to get a drug for $1 or even for free, right? But then why would a company even in the first place invest in developing a program or a drug if they're not going to make the money back? And like something that people just don't think about is like it takes 10 plus, 20 plus, 30 plus years to even get your ROI, right? It's not, or return on investment. It's not an easy one. Someone is selling a drug and, oh, when you look at cell therapies now, I mean, one of the biggest things, or gene therapy, they're pricing at 1.5 million. Outrageous. This is not acceptable. The program took billions of dollars to develop. So those are still now at rare disease stages, right? Like those are conditions that are rare disease. So if you think about like the patient population that is even eligible to get the drug, think about, and those are curative therapies, right? It's not like someone will get it more than once, often, or most of the time. You basically, why would anyone develop a program for like 5 billion, 10 billion, $100 billion? They're charging $1.5 million and they barely have any, patient, well, barely, quote unquote, barely any patients to get it. So do I see my money back in what, 100 years? Is it worth pursuing or not? Those are things that people don't think about. And honestly, I didn't even think about it in my PhD, right? Unless you start looking. So like, what is a different career path? What are the things that I don't think about in my PhD? So really just opening your mind early for those, even if you're not considering a business career, even if you're not considering moving away from science, I found it super helpful to think about those complex and different questions than like my day-to-day on the bench, right? Those are things that are fundamental to understanding like the biggest impact and bigger impact of your research is don't take that 0.1% narrow lens and look through it. Actually take a step back and think, if my program and my research is successful, is it actually going to get to market and are patients actually going to get that drug or that asset? And most probably 99.9% of the answer will be, it's probably not going to succeed, right?
With DeciBio Consulting, is this the type of thing that you would consult on, these very early stage steps and this big picture thinking, and you drill it down from there? When is the right time for someone to come to you and say, I have this idea, and how do you weigh in on that? I'm really curious. How do you decide who's a good client, and what do you do if someone's not a good? I have so many questions. So many questions.
So we support, I mean, DeciBio specifically, and then you'll find it kind of common where consulting in general, especially us in the precision medicine space, the market is early, right? Those precision therapeutics are not going to be a Merck market most of the time, right? They're going to be really biotech, really large academic institutions that have gotten a program to a late stage. So it's really important, not just like DeciBio, it's really important to support those programs and support those companies. I think one issue is that companies don't think, especially when someone is an academic founder, they don't really think about the value of engaging an external entity for support, right? Again, even if you have something, even if you have created a company, if you have not identified your applications, if you have early on, like when you have a prototype, even before that, if you haven't really heard what people want from a tools or a therapy, right? Like if you don't look at the market, you're not going to be able to have a strong foundation for your program, because most of the time it's a single program that you're starting with, or even for your company long term, right? You're not setting up yourself for success. So what we say is like, you have to engage us or other firms really early on, really put a track for yourself, success track, long-term successful track, right? You don't have to engage someone for the entire picture from A to Z when something is in the market, but you can engage in phases, right? Engage in phases, get that external perspective, because it's very easy, especially for academics, to see things from their own perspectives, which is honestly a recipe for disaster most of the time. Right, like that's something that I also didn't learn in my PhD. It's like you actually have to keep an open mind and like ask people how they see it. You're not the expert in your field, and you're not gonna get something to success by just following your instinct and following your vision. There are a lot of stakeholders that are engaged or that are involved and have to be involved, and it's always a good sense check, right? And this is gonna be important. Like engage early, and that's what we tell people and we tell our clients. We love to engage with companies that are early stage because one, precision medicine is still early. This is really still early stages, but also we help and we want to help early companies and early founders succeed long term.
I have a slightly different answer. So as a consulting firm, we'll do all of this stuff. You can think about landscaping. Where should you focus versus not? Market sizing, what's worthwhile to go after. You can think about the strategy. Are you, like a build to buy? Are you a bolt-on? Are you going to IPO? IPOs are kind of closed for now. We can do all that. But I think, and as a firm, we like to really consider ourselves truly kind of industry participants, right? Most consultants, right, they pass off a deck, they're sideline, watchers. What happens, what happens once they've done their work. We really try and engage and work with smaller companies, figure out ways to engage with them, where they might not have the budget typically to, engage a firm like us or a consulting firm generally, with our venture firm. So we do it in a lot of ways, but obviously still, we're not the ones operating the company. So we're participants only to such an extent. From a company standpoint, for a really early company, I think there's no shortage of advice and feedback and ways to pressure test, what you're trying to do in your plan. And I think consultants are probably the worst way to do that. Simply because, again, it kind of goes back to the price and the grit. Like, starting a company is the worst job you could ever choose ever. It's an unlimited number of hours. It's super hard. Everyone's going to say no to you. Everyone's going to tell you you're just, like, I won't curse, but you're doing something wrong. Like, it is a horrible job. And so, like, you need incredible grit and motivation, to keep at it. So how are you going to just, like, if you have that grit and the motivation to learn what you don't know, really go after it? That seems, in my mind, is a little more with the founder hat on. That seems a little more, you can't really align that with having grit. You're like, well, I'll just pay someone else to figure this out for me. Like, how do you go to a venture, like, if you go to a venture firm, you're like, I want to raise $2 million and a quarter of that, or, fifth of that, whatever. It's going to go to this consulting firm. Like, as a investor, I'd be like, good luck. Like, I'm not writing you that check. So I do think you have to be careful about how you engage. But as an early startup, there are so many ways, to get feedback and to pressure test. You can, find your own mentors, connect with people on LinkedIn. You can do accelerators. And there's no shortage of, mentors in these programs who will, happily give you their 2 cents. And I think there you just have to be careful about, again, as a founder, separating the signal from the noise, right? You'll hear a lot of early stuff on and it's scattered. But you'll start slowly. The more people you talk to, it'll start, pointing in a direction or another.
Yeah, and to follow up, Karina, Allison, on one thing that Carl mentioned, I think we're a little unconventional as a company as well, because, Carl said we're participant. We really have a lot of ways to support people. And from that perspective, with the lens of, companies need support. And if they come to us, they want support, but they don't have the money, we have different ways of helping through the venture fund, or through, maybe like a cost price, like a cost structure for us, for our projects, etc. We have flexibility. And that's a little really unique to us. Honestly, maybe I'm too narrow-minded and scope, but I haven't seen a company. I mean, when you think of other consulting companies, it's like, okay, this is my amount of dollar, this is how much I would charge you to the project, and that's it. For us, it's like, you engage with us in a conversation, especially if you're an early company and we want to support you. Again, we're players. We really want for you to succeed. We have different ways of helping. So I think that goes back to what Carl was saying, is like, we're not just like, okay, you engage with us, pay me 60,000, 170,000, and we'll do a project for you. That's not the way we operate.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Would each of you share maybe a little story? Sometimes this is really abstract to people who are not, founders themselves, or they're not in biotech, or they are, but they're at a later stage. Can you share a story? You don't need to name names or anything, that paints a picture of how someone would engage with you and what the outcome of that engagement sort of looked like.
Going back to a success story or something, like some story, one of the projects that I've worked on, and I can't name names obviously, but a project is like a product, the market is in theory small, things will not really change with the product that the company is coming with, and they were almost giving up. So they had this idea of like, why don't we engage with DeciBio? And then that's the project that I worked on a year ago or so. And we're still engaging with the company because based on what we told them and what, like, basically the voice of customer and our strategy that we came with and our conclusion, they're doing extremely well. I mean, they raised $40+ million, which was not feasible, etc., etc. And the idea is, again, just like an example, developing a product, the market is not really going to change. There's not really a lot of value, especially at the price tag that they were coming with or thinking, going to market with. So when we conducted the voice of customer research, we were able to narrow down specific applications of what they should go after. And even in an academic market where usually, you don't really think about the academic market being like a big opportunity when you go to market initially, or like as a main customer, but we were able to identify, academics would actually get this product at this price tag, and then with those value propositions or like this value that you're going to communicate with them. And then we actually took it a step further. We told them this product that you have is great, but it's not gonna make you, successful long term. So we gave them specifics of what people want to develop, and then now they're, raised $40+ million, and they're developing this version 2 of their product. And I mean, they're really on an exponential growth curve, which was not the case when we first spoke to them, and they were struggling to raise money, and they were struggling to even find a market for their product. And I think that was actually one of the best projects and most satisfying projects that I've worked with. And I'm still engaged with our point of contact at the company. I mean, we're still talking to them, and last week I was exchanging emails because they're raising an additional round now, and they're really, that was a satisfying project to work on.
That's a great example. I think that really shows the value that your whole team brings to that equation. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would give a couple other examples. We'll do a lot of work with private equity shops, for example. So doing diligences, their success can be, this seems like a great business to invest in or acquire, or conversely, like, hey, we found some fatal flaws here. We'll do a lot of strategy road mapping. So thinking about, what subsequent products should, say, a customer, one of our clients, what subsequent product should they think about developing and launching? And so there it's, very quickly triaging, unmet needs across their potential customers and stakeholders to really help them identify, okay, you have this product, next you should do B, not C, how you should launch it, right? What do customers care about seeing from like a data validation standpoint for a new product, as an example, if it's a, tool, a reagent, something like that. Pipeline prioritization for therapeutics. There's a lot of groups where it's just, there's a crowded space, right? You're going to be fourth to market in this indication. Like, maybe don't put R&D dollars there, but you can find then another sweet spot for them where it does make sense. So,
and those are things you don't think about when you're a PhD student. So, I mean, again, like just really re-emphasizing, especially for people who are considering different career paths or listening, academic background PhD students, those are things you just don't think about. Like, honestly, right? The exact thing, like, don't put your dollar amount in this program or like in your pipeline or even in your program in academia. Like, just don't waste money on it, or, quote unquote, waste money on it. So, like, really just keeping an open mind on all those things is
Joe has
gonna help
feelings
you
about what
and,
should or
help.
should not exist.
Well, I think it's an interesting point, though. I mean, we're laughing, saying that, sometimes the answer is like, what are you doing here? Just like shut down. But I actually do think there's a lot of value for people. If sometimes your idea is like so great on paper, but it's just not feasible or there's no market for it, to your point, it can be so hard to see that. If you're in it and you're invested, sometimes you need someone to say, you're so smart, right? Your time and money is spent elsewhere. You'll be better off. And I think it can be so hard to see that for yourself. So sometimes no is the value.
You tell them the baby's
Not-
ugly.
And I mean, that's, if you really want to talk about like the hard part of the job, is when we're talking about successful stories, but there are stories that, in consulting, it's a success because you delivered an answer, but it wasn't a success for the company that engaged with you, right? I mean, you're delivering bad news. You're not always delivering good news in consulting or to PE shops, or, sometimes, as Carl was saying, like, we engage with companies doing diligences where it's not the best answer when you're going to them and saying, it's not even a good answer for the company that they're thinking of acquiring or investing in. We're telling them, you should not really invest or think about this company. Just look at something else.
DeciBions. This is what you call DeciBio employees. Am I correct with that?
It is.
No, it's great. And it seems like you guys have a really strong culture that you're building and really into team building. Can we talk a little bit about sort of the internal culture and also what you see and advise startups when it comes to building their team culture? And do you help them all get creative names for their teams as well?
It's really important, the culture. We have a great ops team that just really focuses on this. And not in kind of a bland way of like, oh, you have a happy hour, once every other week or whatever. I mean, it is almost like indoctrination, for better or worse. So the team is really close, and I think that matters because when you need to work long hours, when something's hard, what else kind of keeps you motivated? One of the pieces to our culture, I'll tell a funny story, is our firm loves dogs. So we have like most of our dogs on the website. I personally have two dogs, only one of which is office compatible, but the one of the founding partners just loves my 90+ pound dumb as a rock golden retriever, like dumb as a rock in a good way. He's a great dog. So he's on the website. One of the other partners has I don't even know what like a poodle breed, and his name is President Georgie Woofington. And we get a lot of spam as a firm. People, and sometimes you get emails that are spoofing the partners. They'll say, "Hey, this is Stefan. I can't chat right now. I'm on a call, but like I need you to buy some gift cards." Well, we recently actually got one that was, "Hey, this is President Georgie Woofington, and I'm on the phone, but I can't." And I think like all the dogs also have titles. I think President Georgie Woofington's title might be like president or something. It's something like that. The sign like President Georgie Woofington, like President DeciBio, and you're just like, oh man, you guys gotta, So the team had a pretty good laugh about that. But look, when the president emails you directly, you respond. You take action.
We took it seriously. I mean, we responded to the email.
You buy those
apologizing
gift cards.
for like taking 5 minutes.
30 gift cards to PetSmart immediately.
It is important, right? But you still, if you really think about DeciBio, it's like it is a fun environment. It's a good family-ish, but you have to be hardworking, right? Like it's not. It goes hand in hand. Like it's a business at the end where we work hard, but we also play hard, right? So it comes with the perks of you don't need to think about joining DeciBio or even applying to DeciBio if you're not willing to put in the hard work, especially when you think of precision medicine. I mean, this field needs more support than you can think, or when you think about, your Tylenol or just like typical drug, is this space needs a lot of thinking, a lot of analysis, a lot of engagement, and honestly, like more supports than any other field that you can think about.
We just had someone spoof Karina too and text everyone on our team being like,
Uh,
you need to schedule this meeting immediately and whatever. That story rings so true. And now all I can
That's
think is
amazing.
we should all just put our animals on the website so we know exactly when it's a spoofing situation.
That's a really good idea.
incredible.
That's a really
I'm going to
good
laugh
idea.
about that all day.
it's insane when you think about the bots, like how advanced they've become. It is just, I mean, we get like one every week at least. It's like things that they say. I mean, I get even text messages, not even emails, like text messages to my personal phone. Like recently, I got a text message from like our founding partner, Stefan. It messaged saying, "Hey, I'm like on the road," and he was actually on the road, which makes me like really freaking out. It's, on the road, we really have that. We really need to talk. Our client had really bad reaction to our deliverable. And the funny thing is, like, I mean, I didn't even have Stefan's like personal number at that point, so like I took it like really seriously. So like I messaged back, and like the responses that like I got back is like pretty crazy. It's like the immediate response, like within like a minute, like really responding is like, yeah, they didn't value our approach and communication and transparency. I was like, oh, okay, like, and I
Joe,
mean,
that was Steph. He
because
was texting you. That's why, that's
I know. And then at the end, I was like, got sketchy. I was like, and it was like a number from California, like zip code, or like sorry, like the call code, and I was like, you know what, like this is getting too serious, and I can't even tell if this is like right or not. So like I just like went on our Slack channel. I was like, hey Stefan, can we like have a Google Meet like to discuss what you're just texting me? And he's like texting you, and then I was exchanging text messages for like 5 minutes, and it's crazy. Like if you think of like how advanced they've become. And I went on a rambling thread here, but it is insane.
It is
Everyone
scary.
needs to be careful, including like us.
I think that was President Woofington just messing with you.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah, probably.
ended every sentence
Actually,
with
it
a
really,
dog paw emoji, and you're like, why?
I actually think it's a really interesting topic because part of our business, our sister business, is working with people who are moving from academia into biotech. And this is such a common thing, but it's not, trying to be a good employee and you're like, oh, I'll respond to this text. Like, it's actually it's a big problem. And we've seen people, have really big security issues at biotechs based on these spoofing attacks. So
Actually, I'd love to put a note out about that. Like, the one thing I'd pay for when you're first starting up a company is IT, and it doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, there's like virtual, IT folks who will, set up your computers, have VPNs. Like, they don't have to be. It's not like a person you hired. It's just like some firm that's outsourced. But that's critical. Like, I mean, for whatever reason, the last, I don't know, 2 months, even at Suono, like, I get every day I'm getting 6, 7, 8 emails that are all like, oh, your Microsoft account password, this, that, blah, 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 blah. Like, someone, it feels very targeted. And I do know actually of startups that, have had, raised quite a bit of money and were targeted and did actually, lose some money due to some of these things. So even as like a small startup, small company, I think just invest in IT, right? Get an external group, they handle your virus software, your firewalls, all that stuff.
yeah, that's a good point.
What piece of advice would you offer someone on the cusp of launching their own biotech venture? Which could be a really good question.
I'd say the biggest piece is, you have to figure out and know what you don't know. You have to have, some amount of conviction, but make it smart conviction so that, like, if your idea doesn't have legs, you can just kill it. But the final piece is, like, the majority of your communication is going to be on slides, right? If you're raising funding, blah, 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 everyone's going to ask you for the deck. And you're going to say, hey, I want to talk to you. And they're like, do you have a deck? Send it over. Please, just please, like, review your deck. Have a friend who's not in engineering or science review it. I think that's another, again, like the PhD of these slides that you present, it's just like so dense. Here, like, succinct, try and make it visual if you can. And like within 10 slides total. And you got to tell me what you do. No roundabout data, like, tell me what you do. Because I'm looking at that deck and I don't have a lot of time. If I don't know what you do, I'm not going to take the call to try and figure it out. And you would be, I was surprised, like, how many decks you'll get where you're like 3/4 of the way through and you're still just like, what do they do? Like, it's not a rare problem. So, like, craft your deck, have a friend who's not in your area, like, look at it. And then it'll be good practice for getting beat down, because that's all you do as a founder. So
I definitely would believe that, how often you probably get wildly inefficient decks, because we look at resumes all day long, and maybe 1 in 300 resumes gets right to the point and tells me, what's your value proposition and why should I care? And that is all that anyone really wants to know at the end of the day. I don't care if you are trying to get funding or you're trying to get a job. Just tell people what they need to know.
And don't tell
That's
me
the
you
bad.
know how to use Microsoft Office. Like,
Yes,
for goodness sake, that is not a skill.
we have everyone cut that out. Absolutely.
Oh my
That's a
gosh.
basic need now, like in anything you want to do. But honestly, like, it's that advice that Carl was saying, we're just discussing or giving, it is not just for building your own biotech. It is just anything you're considering away from science. You need to know how to be succinct and stay to the point, and really just communication. I think that is where it goes to communication, right? Setting yourself, setting what you're thinking, setting your conviction. I think that skill you do not learn in your PhD. You know, and you learn how to communicate your science on a very heavy slide, but it's not how you sell yourself, and that's not how you even, build your own biotech. And that's, I mean, honestly, that's like an issue that is sometimes happens when, like, PhD students, and they're starting even in consulting or VC, and they're working on their first deck, and it's like full of words and data and graphs. I'm like, no, it's just like one graph, 3 bullet points. Give me, what is the situation, why is it the case, and what does it mean? Like, this is all people care about, and this is everything you need to know. And even when you're selling yourself on your resume, what did you do? Why did you do it? What are your skills out of it, right?
Absolutely. I love those answers. Thank you. Okay, this is Allison's favorite question, but I get to ask it this time. Could both of you guys tell us what your last or maybe favorite fiction or nonfiction book was? We're basically compiling a book list, and this is really selfish for us, but we want to know what you like reading.
I do not read fiction. I have and even like watch movies that are really kind of towards the fictional side. Well, so I contradict myself. 99% of things I watch are not fictional and read are non-fictional. I really kind of read books that are more self-building, uh, sometimes metaphysics related, etc. But recently, the most recent one have been, and I adore that person, Brene Brown. She is absolutely my favorite person in the world, and I've been reading her books and her podcasts, and she has the most amazing HBO shows. That is Atlas of the Heart. I mean, that's a book, but also if you haven't seen the HBO, whoever is listening, the HBO show, 5 parts, 30 minutes each. It teaches you things that in your personal relationships with other people are important, in your day-to-day management, kind of realizing how you're feeling and how you communicate that feeling as well. Could apply to clients, to friendships, to your relationships. I mean, I tend to like read those kind of books to, and honestly, not even to learn myself, but part of like us. I mean, Carl's level and my levels, we have to also manage teams. And if you can't see that perspective, and if you cannot communicate efficiently, and if you cannot understand where people are coming from and how to mitigate what they're saying and understand them and communicate properly, this is a recipe for disaster. You need to learn those basic understanding. And a lot of, I mean, leaders or founders of biotechs, they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to build a effective, comprehensive, really intertwined and healthy team. And I think that is pretty important.
Yeah, we love Brene around here. We love a good rumble. So,
Yeah. And Ted Lasso. I mean, I cannot stop talking about
yeah.
Ted Lasso.
So I don't read a lot. I read a tremendous amount, but like for work and news, I don't read like for fun. And what fun reading I do, it's on audio. It's audiobooks.
That's
So
that
I'll
counts.
say that up front. But I'm a little different. I like reading about people who did really hard things. That maybe like sounds weird, but I find that kind of like inspirational, interesting. It makes me like want to do more things. So I'm gonna go with two, and they're weird. These might be a little off-putting, but one is called Tap Code. And this is why Joe had to go first. I had to look back at the names. This is like a year ago because with the pandemic, my commute's gotten shorter. My audio book listening has gotten less. But so Tap Code about this Air Force pilot in the Vietnam War. He was in captivity for like, I want to say like years and years, maybe a decade or more. And he developed literally like tapping on pipes and like taught this communication. So you learn it in like basic training, but only he remembered it. And so he had to like reteach it to all the other like POWs. And like you're in very poor conditions to say the least. And so like just incredible, like how he just survived. And the second one, again, a little weird. It's called Surprise, Kill, Vanish. It's on the history of basically like the development of covert ops. That one is amazing. It is like a little freaky, but it's like we need this thing across the world like to not exist tomorrow again. And you're like, how did we develop that capability? Also, another cool fact: there's gray berets in the military. I don't know why I'm going on like the military so much. They're weathermen. They're basically like Navy SEAL weathermen, and they go in before anyone else to basically tell the weather where we need to land like a ton of troops and equipment and stuff to make sure the weather's okay. Because apparently historically, like we've tried to land somewhere and like a windstorm came up and like everything was destroyed. And like you can imagine, you're like the first and only person there. Like you gotta be able to take care of anything and everything. Like there's no backup. Well, I don't have a lot of things for that, but I definitely don't have like the wherewithal with the right term for that. But I'm like, that's pretty amazing.
No disrespect to weather people, but they're not always that accurate either. So can you imagine having to be like, you better get this right or else this is.
Love that. So we'll wrap up with where the audience can find the two of you. We are going to link in the show notes your LinkedIn and anything else that you want us to put in there. So what's the best way to get in touch?
TikTok.
TikTok. Okay.
No.
Me too.
LinkedIn. Yeah.
Great.
I'm
And
not on
Georgie
TikTok.
Wuffington, he takes my calls.
Yeah, I'm not on TikTok. I mean, it's like on our actually that's bio page is pretty good for like the team. We have
Yeah, that's true.
everything is linked to the LinkedIn or some of the content that we even put if you want to reach out for specific content. But most of the time, actually, it's just like LinkedIn. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on a lot of the social media channels. I don't even know what
Joe,
TikTok
your
is in the first
dog
place.
has an Instagram. Don't try and.
My dog has an Instagram, but like I don't have TikTok. I don't. This is too young for me. I'm old. I don't do TikTok.
Same. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was absolutely fascinating. I loved your perspective on coming into this from, from your PhD. I think a lot of people will find that interesting. And I think we learned a lot about, things that people don't think about as they're in their PhD and beyond. So thank you.
And this
Yeah,
is the
thanks for
most
having
I
us.
have laughed doing this yet. And so thank you so much. This has just made my day. This was great.
Thanks for again. I think you found Joe, but thanks for having us.